No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live, episode number 97. And please click and subscribe to our brand new independent news source. Turn on the notification bell, then you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Breaking right now, Elon Musk has just branded the UK a police state after I brought the story of Cameron Bell to international attention. So this is the 23-year-old care worker who has been behind bars for months after streaming on TikTok the unrest following the Southport massacre, even though she took part in no violence herself. Also just in Soviet Britain, The Guardian reveals the witch hunt against Britain's best newspaper columnist, Allison Pearson, was sparked by a leftie snivel servant. And was the ex-post behind all of this at all criminal or hateful? I'm going to tell you everything you need to know in my digest next. By the way, as free speech in the UK is smashed for good, do you think the left give a damn? No. Unhinged Vorderman cares much more about a suspension bridge quitting ex.
Carol, it's such a lovely bridge, isn't it? The Clifton Suspension Bridge.
It really is, Alice. But have you heard the news?
What news?
The suspension bridge has come off Twitter.
Absolute lunatics. Also coming up on the show today, walking your dog in Wales is now considered racist. Rachel Thieves has been exposed for lying on her CV, but the MSM are trying to pretend it's not a story. I've got the shock new details. And Mark Steyn is facing financial ruin thanks to the Ofcommunists. I'll give you an update on the former GB News host. And my superstar panel, Patrick O'Flynn of the State of the Nation Substack and the Conservative commentator Tom Sullivan join me to dissect the madness throughout the entire show. Then, in the uncancelled after show, Tina Brown has issued a shock plea for Prince William to take Prince Harry back for the good of Britain and the royal family. What is that woman drinking? Well, our royal mastermind, Angela Levin, has all of the latest on that. The big news, I hope you know by now, but the uncancelled after show is now broadcast daily, exclusive and on demand via my Substack page. Please do sign up by visiting www.outspoken.live. A monthly paid membership from just £5 a month gives you access to the after show every Monday to Friday, all my exclusive reporting and columns too, and Substack is a brilliant space, free of censorship. But now, let's go. So I cannot tell you enough how serious the threat to free speech in the UK is. The fact that the MSM and establishment refuse to comment on this dystopian creep towards authoritarianism under slippery Starmer doesn't mean that it's not happening. It simply means they are a major part of the plot. Elon Musk gets that. Thank God for Elon Musk. Actually, after I brought international attention yesterday to the shocking case of the 23-year-old care worker and citizen journalist Cameron Bell, who was jailed for 9 months simply for live streaming a so-called riot after the Southport massacre, even though she didn't take part in any of the violence herself, in the past few hours, Musk has responded very clearly. Look at his declaration. It's simple, but it's chilling. The UK is now a police state. Just think about that for 1 second. The richest man in the world, a senior member of the next Trump administration, and the owner of the free speech platform X, which is now the #1 source for journalism internationally, decrying Great Britain as a police state. And he really isn't wrong. Two of the smartest women I know personally, women Britain should be proud of and getting to solve our problems, Allison Pearson and Bernice Bofforth, have both been hounded by police, the same police who refused to solve burglaries, refused to solve muggings, refused to solve rapes, but these two women have been hounded for posts on X. Meanwhile, good honest grandmothers languishing behind bars for posts on Facebook. But it's Allison's case that is finally getting the MSM to look at the madness of the police attempting to patrol right-wing speech, with even 9-year-olds being targeted for playground insults. But this afternoon, I can tell you there has been a major development in the case from The Guardian, which reports it was a non-Muslim former snivel servant who shot Allison to the cops for her tweet. So this is what the Hard Left newspaper, which ironically quit X this week, remember that, over its hatred for free speech, this is what The Guardian is reporting this afternoon. So they believe that they have found the post at the centre of the row. It is a retweet by Pearson of a photograph posted several months ago amid heightened tensions over the policing of Gaza protests. It shows a group of people of colour posing with a flag on a British street flanked by 3 police officers. The Guardian says the photograph angered Pearson, who wrote a tweet condemning the Metropolitan Police. And this is what the police said. Sorry, this is what the tweet said. How dare they? Invited to pose for a photo with lovely, peaceful British friends of Israel on Saturday, police refused. Look at this lot, smiling with the Jew haters. Now, The Guardian says that the picture is actually from Manchester and that the flag is from Pakistan. But so what? Allison deleted the post. She didn't want to spread fake news, although the sentiment was certainly true. It was simply just the wrong picture that had been used. But how the hell could that post spark a criminal investigation spanning 3 police forces? Well, The Guardian gave us a clue this afternoon. Their report goes on. The person who complained to the police is not Muslim nor one of those pictured, but a person of colour who told The Guardian that Allison's description of the 2 people of colour as Jew haters is racist and inflammatory. Okay, so I know what's going on here now. The police are being used as part of the culture war, and it is utterly chilling. Now, Allison she isn't going to go quietly, trust me. I've spoken to her today, and she has posted on X, I am proud that after telling what Essex police did to me, stories of children getting non-crime hate incidents for saying a girl smells of fish are coming out. Children. We live in an Orwellian state and normal people must fight for freedom as best they can. And there's so much of this horror going around. I want to share with you a post that Rachel Halliwell sent me yesterday on X. Now, I'm sharing this because it has also captured the attention of Elon Musk. So Rachel wrote to me to say, my son, who is 16, will be sentenced on the 3rd of December for the Southport riots. It is his first offence. His sister was groomed, raped and beaten at 12 in Southport. She killed herself after being failed by Merseyside police. Her inquest starts the 13th of January. Her brother is going to prison. And so much of what is going on comes down to the authorities and this government trying to shut us up about Southport, as Allison so brilliantly outlined on Outspoken earlier this week.
That this individual was allegedly making a bioweapon in their kitchen, that information is going to go straight to the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister and to the security services. So it's extremely serious. And I think the idea is, let's not give these plebs a reason to kick off. But in fact, what happened was that backfired. And then people got very upset and angry. And I would say that the alleged murder of 3 beautiful little girls was a cause to get upset and to be very angry and to wonder what manner of person is this that's living in our country who carries out this barbaric slaughter. But as we know from my visit from the police expressing any of this, I mean, who knows, you know, they can call anything racism, Dan.
Yes,
even if you're...
And the tentacles, though, Alison, what really concerns me is, and as Robert Jenrick posted about the Southport cover-up, we still don't know the truth. Who in government knew what and when? Why were the public kept in the dark for so long? Labour are deluded if they think these questions are going away, and that's not the only two-tier nonsense, is it? As Richard Taylor attempted to remind the MSM today, it's been 113 days since these thugs attacked police officers and are still not charged. Disgusting. But do you think the loony left care about any of this? Do they care about the two-tier justice? Do they care about the removal of free speech? Of course not. Of course not. Indeed, they are so focused on trying to get at Musk by quitting X in a huff because their woman didn't win in America. So, I mean, I don't know whether to laugh or cry about this. Carol Vorderman, who, let's just be honest about this, becomes more unhinged by the day, has visited the suspension bridge in Clifton that has gone wrong. Sorry, that has gone viral. It's gone viral for all the wrong reasons because the bridge decided to quit X.
Carol, it's such a lovely bridge, isn't it? The Clifton Suspension Bridge.
It really is, Alice. But have you heard the news?
What news?
The suspension bridge has come off Twitter.
How terrifying that we have morons like that currently running the UK. God help us. Now, my superstar panel. And I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by the Conservative commentator Tom Sullivan and the author of the brilliant State of the Nation Substack. He's on Substack too, you see. It's the place to be these days. Patrick O'Flynn. Great to have you both here. Patrick, can I kick off with you? This Guardian report revealing what Allison Pearson's so-called criminal, so-called racist post on X was. I believe they are right. My understanding is that is the post that the police are investigating. Can you see in any way how that post could at all be criminal?
No, not at all. I mean, it's a really important breakthrough. I don't suppose the Guardian intended it to be helpful to the free speech side of the debate. But what they make clear is that Allison perhaps misconstrued a picture as being from one of the hate marches in London when it was from Manchester. Now, she'd organised, I think, the day or two before the first demonstration, of sympathy for the families in Israel, and was hurt that the police wouldn't pose for a picture with that very peaceful and dignified demonstration. She assumed that the picture was from one of the hate marches. Now, it seems to have been in Manchester, and the flag involved was the flag of Imran Khan's political party in Pakistan. So she used the phrase about the police, who she thought to be the Met Police when it was the Greater Manchester Police, were photographed alongside what she termed Jew haters. Now, as you say, she deleted the post swiftly on learning of the factual mistakes. But if you actually look online, if you just Google Imran Khan's political party and anti-Semitism, surprise, surprise, there's quite a lot there. There are leading figures in it who have indulged in anti-Semitism. The whole party has been accused of anti-Semitism. So in no way could she be said, even accidentally, to have said something that was wrong. And the key thing is the complainant. The complainant says they're a former civil servant, a person of colour. And their contention was, as reported in The Guardian, that every time a media figure criticises a person of colour, that means that they suffer more racial abuse themselves. So any of us, for instance, who criticised the gangster Chris Cabba after that recent trial, we could all get a knock on the door because this person might say, well, Patrick O'Flynn or Dan Wootton said something disobliging about Chris Cabba, and the next day someone in the street said something to me that was unkind, and I think it's they were stirring up hatred. This should have been thrown out within 10 minutes. Instead,
Totally.
we've had a year
Totally.
long.
I couldn't agree more for so many reasons, Tom Sullivan, because not only is it absolutely chilling in terms of what this would mean for free speech for the reasons that Patrick has just so brilliantly outlined, we've also got the issue of police resources. I mean, this is a failing police force. They solve something like 15% of hate crimes. That's the most successful area. You know, if you're talking about rapes or burglaries or something like that, it's about 5 to 10%. But I look at this situation, Tom, and then I look at the fact that Cameron Bell is currently behind bars, this 23-year-old care worker who I believe was a citizen journalist. Anyone who was filming that unrest was trying to broadcast what was going on to the public. She wasn't involved in any violence herself. Can you understand why Elon Musk today has described the UK as a police state?
I can understand, Dan, and the more comparisons you make, the more disgusting you realize how this entire situation is. So to make the comparison with Cameron Bell, who has faced jail time for doing journalism, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I compare that to what we learned today, that a teacher who was responsible for distributing thousands of paedophilic images, some involving a child of 6 months, has been let off without any jail time at all. You asked Patrick, is it criminal? The clue is in the name. They call it a non-crime hate incident. So if they're saying from the outset it is not a crime, and specifically for Essex Police Force, who visited Allison, in every category, you were right, it's between 5 and 10% in every type of category of the amount of crimes they actually solve. So what is the purpose of our police? We're the country that invented modern policing with Robert Peel, and now they've become some weird type of enforcer of the state ideology of woke liberal multiculturalism. And Allison coming out with her experience, as you mentioned earlier in the show, has sparked other people to come out with their stories. I did have to laugh, although it's not funny, of a 9-year-old school child being reported. Can you imagine a police officer? I would feel absurd if I was a police officer and I've dedicated my life to ensuring that the public are safe and putting criminals where they're supposed to be, writing out the words 9-year-old called another child the word of retard at school. I would feel absurd. So it makes me wonder what type of people actually work.
And one kid had described another student as smelling of fish, which, might be a little bit unpleasant. Certainly not something that needs to involve the police. This is nuts. This is absolutely insane. And as the front page of the Daily Mail points out today, Starmer supports this. This is the type of society he wants. But that's dangerous, isn't it, though? Because Patrick O'Flynn, as you pointed out quite recently on X, of course, talking about Lucy Connolly, the wife of the Conservative Party councillor who has gone to jail for an X post, you say, well, if that's the case, then surely our Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, should be sent to jail for comments that he made in a tweet. And I actually wasn't aware of this. I knew he had said some terrible posts on X before, but he said that he would pour whatever I can get my hands on over a white supremacist. Now, of course, I can understand why he would be angry about a white supremacist, but again, he is surely directly inciting violence there, Patrick O'Flynn. So the left have to be careful.
Well, also David Lammy is in a position to understand the responsibilities of a professional political communicator, right? Mrs. Connolly might be the wife of a councillor, but she shouldn't be judged as being conversant with every spit and cough of the rapidly evolving restrictions on free speech. Now, with her sort of slightly intemperate expression, I can't remember if it was Facebook or Twitter, but she took it down after a couple of hours. If a normal person in the heat of the moment says something, and I think in her case it definitely fell short of incitement, if they then say sorry and take it down, surely in a proportional country that should be the end of it. Perhaps they should be told, maybe think about being more careful in future. But to then hound them and put a mother in prison is outrageous. And one thing I think it shouldn't be neglected in this is Suella Braverman, who, the clever people
Former
in the
Home Secretary.
Conservative Party branded, an extremist, a hardliner on all this stuff. She's tended to be proven right, by the way, about nearly everything. She went to Rishi Sunak about 18 months or so ago, asking him to get rid of this whole area of the police involvement in so-called non-crime hate incidents, right? They allegedly slightly raised the bar on them, but that's not reflected in the figures which show the police engaging in more and more of those. But Rishi Sunak was too cowardly, too much of a fence sitter to say, yes, this is outrageous. We should have confidence in free speech in this country. And he didn't do it. Now, that means Keir Starmer and his insidious, quite sinister new left student union government have got all the tools at their disposal to carry on like this and to give left-wing activists out there the ability to summon the police to the door of people who say things they, quote, find offensive. And they're not even regarded as complainants. According to what the policeman said to Allison Pearson, they are objectively victims. It's outrageous.
It is completely outrageous. By the way, I've found out a little bit more about the case of Cameron Bell, the care worker, and it is so, so disturbing. So this poor woman, 23 years old, who the police have tried to make an example of, she was arrested in September and immediately remanded in custody. So this poor woman has been in jail since September. Now, you wonder why people plead guilty, because lots of people have said to me, why did she plead guilty? She would have had so much pressure, probably from her lawyers, from the police, saying, look, this is the quickest way to get you out of here. But the judge still gave her 9 months. Now, as a result of the prison space shortages and all of that type of thing, she is going to be out probably within a couple of weeks. But how terrifying that this 23-year-old who was just filming something going on in the streets was immediately remanded in custody. 23 years old, she lost her job as a care worker. She's been plastered all over the newspapers thanks to this PR campaign by the Staffordshire Police. Shame on them all.
Yeah, can I just say on that I think the cumulative impact of all of this is to make it impossible for normal working class people to take part in politics and debate in this country.
Yes.
If you're one of these graduate, never had a proper job, learned all the jargon, you can skate around this. I think the three of us today, we've probably become quite canny at knowing where the line is. But even so, it's increasingly perilous. If you're a normal British person who wants to participate in democracy, to express your outrage when little girls get butchered, you're now, boiling with frustration, but you're not confident enough to say anything because you think you might end up in jail. And that, I think, is another really...
It's about shutting us up. It is about shutting up the white working classes of the UK. And I will just stress the point again, we were lied to over the Southport massacre. While we can't talk about it too much, what I can categorically say is that Axel Ruda-Cabana has been charged with the production of ricin. He has been charged with having an Al-Qaeda training manual at his home. So we were lied to when we were absolutely assured that there was no way that this was connected to terror. But look, the madness just goes on. Dog-free zones are now needed to make the outdoors less racist, the government in Wales has been told. Now, I actually couldn't believe this story, but Calvin Mackenzie has summed it up absolutely perfectly. He says, you couldn't make this up. Two organisations, the important North Wales Africa Society, not sure it has a southern branch, and Climate Cymru ethnic minorities have urged the Welsh Government to create dog-free zones to make the outdoors less racist. Labour's Welsh administration says it is committed to creating an anti-racist nation by 2030. Now, Calvin says they could start by Welsh people stopping hating the English. Labour needn't bother themselves about 2030, as I guarantee this mob of socialist half-wits will be slung out by reform in the Senate elections in 2026. My bet is that Farage's team will receive around 35% of the vote, and possibly higher if the North Wales Africa Society can be persuaded to campaign for Labour. But Patrick O'Flynn, can you believe this? I mean, how on earth can walking your dog outside be at all linked with colonization? And even if it is, why on earth should we decolonize? That is one of the most beautiful English traditions, taking your dog for a walk outside.
Completely. And as an occasional jogger, sometimes I would myself be grateful for a dog-free area, but that's got nothing to do with racism. I did a bit of research on this afternoon. There are some branches of Orthodox Jewry and of Sunni Islam that allegedly regard dogs as, unclean animals. But, owning dogs, Britain is a nation of dog lovers. The idea as well, I'm not aware of any concerted call from anyone in either of those communities to ban people walking their dogs in parks. And the idea that we should contort our culture, so ridiculously just to appease a theoretical risk that someone might say, well, I've arrived in this country from another country. I don't like dogs, therefore you've got to clear the park of dogs. Well, that really is pushing it. And I think the left could find almost above any other issue, if you start coming between the British people, and their family pets, you are in big trouble.
Tom Sullivan, what did you make of this one?
I think Patrick has just made a very good point, and it's not just in this case. I notice it all the time. I mean, I'm technically half BAME myself, not that I ever think of that or describe myself in such a ridiculous way. But the sad reality is that more often than not, these ridiculous schemes are come up with by those same types of university educated, not that well educated, university brainwashed, shall we say, white middle class people, and they make these suggestions on behalf of ethnic minorities. And the sad thing is, when people see, people who are actually busy at work most of the time, see these headlines, they assume naturally that it's coming from these communities themselves. So these do-gooders are actually increasing the tension between communities, the word that Starmer loves to say instead of the British public, the communities. They're increasing the tension with all this nonsense. And it's impossible to, for me at least, maybe you guys can do it, to detangle and straighten out all of this nonsense. So it's a climate change group called Climate Cymru BAME. So I thought climate change is one of those, if it is, as what they say, is one of those things which doesn't discriminate because it affects the world as a planet, but somehow they've managed to put that together. And what on earth does climate change have to do with taking your dog for a walk? It's nonsense.
It really is. It really is nonsense.
And can I just add one very quick thing? Honestly, I tried, I forget, but I tried to make this point as much as possible. All of these stories, I know, we laugh and we cry because if you didn't laugh, you would cry. But it's not funny at all, in the sense that I think it's actually, this is becoming a national security risk, because I can tell you, as someone who speaks a few different languages and monitors foreign media, these types of stories are covered in Russia, in China, in many other countries which we consider adversarial. And the reaction there is not, oh, isn't that bad? The reaction is, oh my God, what type of state is this? They're very weak. This is a collapsing society. The authorities and the people in power in this country are not serious. And that emboldens them to be hostile against us. And I think that's very true.
Yeah, I do think that's a good point, actually. The report itself is absolutely ridiculous, though. I just want to share with you what Richard Littlejohn had to say about it in the Daily Mail. He wrote, the justification for creating dog-free zones is not fully explained, although during a focus group set up, one black African female stated that she feels unsafe in the presence of dogs. Others were traumatized by seeing dogs fouling on the floor. It's what dogs like bears do in the woods. Where else are they supposed to go? The report also states some participants expressed apprehension about visiting the countryside owing to their racial or religious identities. Goodness me, Patrick.
Well, this is sort of picks up on BBC Country File from a year or two back, doesn't it? About is the countryside racist? And apparently, if you don't have, the set proportion of minority ethnic people among your ramblers and picnickers, that means you are racist. The idea that people, according to their own cultural norms, do the sort of stuff they like, and some groups like the countryside more than others, that is just not allowed anymore. Everything has to be measured, done by proportion. Expensive public sector schemes have to be invented and funded to try and equalize things. I mean, I'm quite heartened that I think the peak of that has passed. And, this is part of the stuff which cost Kamala Harris and the Democrats so dear in America. And I think some of the woke left across the world are now waking up to the fact that they usually say, oh, it's the right starting a culture war. But, some of their more absurd positions have been noticed by people with common sense, which still, I'm glad to say, is most people in most Western societies. And, the Welsh elections, 2026, if these kind of stories are still in circulation, I can see Reform actually winning those elections. There'll be a cry of fury because Wales, most Welsh people are pretty socially conservative, full of common sense, and they must be tearing their hair out.
Yeah. Well, especially given you can only drive 20 miles per hour.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this is nuts. It's completely nuts. And I think, Tom, you're completely right to point out that BAME people or ethnic minorities, however you want to put it, the vast majority of them are completely opposed to this too. And we saw that with Trump in America, didn't we? Real growing support amongst Latino communities, amongst young black people who are just completely sick of utter mad wokery when they see their country crumbling around them. Breaking right now. Oh, sorry, Tom, you go.
No. 100% correct is what I was going to say.
Breaking right now, Rachel Reeves has been exposed as a liar, as a charlatan, but the mainstream media don't want to talk about it. So this as an astonishing story revealed by the Guido Fawkes website. Now, I've been on this for some time, and Rachel Reeves has now conceded that she lied about her previous job by changing her LinkedIn profile. Now, of course, this comes on a day where our GDP and our growth figures are in the toilet. Perhaps not a surprise, given we have a chancellor who can't even tell the truth about where she used to work and what she used to do. So let me share the Guido Fawkes story with you. Guido was watching Reeves' Mansion House speech last night and noticed she limited her tenure as an economist to the short years she spent at the Bank of England, saying, before entering politics, I worked as an economist at the Bank of England and then in financial services. Funnily enough, Reeves has also done a bit of retrospective digital editing. She has quietly changed her LinkedIn account CV. Gone is the Chancellor's claim that she was an economist at the Bank of Scotland. She now just says she worked in retail banking at HBOS. As Guido revealed last month, Reeves actually worked in a small complaints team within HBOS, which managed administration processes, IT matters, and small projects and planning. Just in case you thought her experience as an economist justified that budget. Now, in the last couple of hours, a Treasury source has admitted that the LinkedIn was edited. They said she worked in retail banking covering various areas, drawing on her background as an economist. Her LinkedIn has been updated to reflect that. But this is incredibly serious in my view, even though the mainstream media is ignoring the story. Robert Jenrick, the Tory leadership contender, now Shadow Justice Secretary, wrote, Reeves said she was an economist. Turns out she's just economical with the truth. And what I find astonishing is that most of the mainstream media have had opportunities to sit down with Rachel Reeves, including GB News, and not one question has been put to her about her fake CV, about her lies. Can you imagine if this was a Tory Chancellor? It would have been leading the mainstream media news day after day after day with a drumbeat that they simply must resign. And it looks like there's a lot to look into within Rachel Reeves' past. I want to share with you a LinkedIn post which is going viral. This has been made by a man called Kev Gillett. He writes, back in 2009, Rachel Reeves worked 3 levels below me. Just facts. She was a complaints support manager at HBOS, not an economist. #fact-checked. Now, Kev Gillett goes on. Nearly got sacked due to an expenses scandal where the 3 senior managers were all signing off each other's expenses. Narrow escape. Then had lots of doctors, dentists visits. So she was followed. Turns out she was doing Labour council business. When shown the facts, she resigned. Now she is robbing people who've worked hard. Now she is ruining every agricultural family. Evil, evil socialists. Socialism is great until they've spent your money. Now, personally, I would just like Rachel Reeves to not be the biggest hypocrite in Britain, given that when she was in opposition, she posted on X that honesty and integrity matter in our politics and for our democracy. Today, the Conservatives failed to stand up for either. Britain deserves better. Well, look, I agree with you on that, Rachel Thieves. I completely agree. We deserve better than a 2-bit chancellor who would lie on their CV about being an economist and then quietly tweet their LinkedIn page to think that we wouldn't notice. My superstar panel back now, Patrick O'Flynn and Tom Sullivan. Patrick, I mean, this story is extraordinary on so many levels, but it does show you how the mainstream media are completely in the tank for this Labour administration. She hasn't even been asked a question about this. It's only Guido Fawkes that's doing the reporting.
Yeah, I think this is very serious. I mean, Rachel Reeves was sort of integral to the way Labour won the election, and she had, relative to her immediate predecessor as Shadow Chancellor, Annalise Dodds, she had an aura of sort of plainness, competence, not frightening the horses. But you know, I've written a few weeks back on my State of the Nation Substack that there's something not quite right about Rachel Reeves. She's not all that in terms of her political skills. She's not very good. She talked us to the brink of a recession in order to try and sort of create this 22 billion black hole. But one thing we haven't mentioned yet is she got caught for, you know, several plagiarism episodes in a book that she wrote as well. You know, she is, you know, her idea that she is Mrs. Integrity is coming apart very quickly. Now, it's very serious for Starmer because even though Rachel Reeves has been subperforming, had a torrid time, her integrity is massively under the microscope, she is still one of the top 3 or 4 cabinet performers because this is the most useless, obnoxious collection of people ever to sit in a British cabinet. I can't think of one of them, but bar arguably Wes Streeting when he's not threatening to push people in front of trains, who's got any charm. Maybe Pat McFadden has a bit of nous, and that other than that, they're like a sort of sour-faced bunch of student union has-beens. And there isn't anyone to replace Rachel Reeves with. And yet she's bad at her job. She's projecting, you know, terrible character traits. She is, you know, accidentally sort of tripping her way into terrible first order, you know, messes, such as the way that farmers are being treated, such as the where she drew her means testing line on withdrawing the winter fuel benefit with no mandate, by the way. She's taking it away from 90% of pensioners and then trying to argue that, oh, we're taking it away from the better off. Well, that doesn't wash either. So I think the overall conclusion is Rachel Reeves is hopeless, you know, and most of the rest of the cabinet are just as bad. And this is why Labour is sinking like a stone.
Indeed. Well, look, as Nigel Farage has written on this today. Rachel Reeves told us she was an economist. In reality, she ordered the paper clips instead. And Tom Sullivan, we know that none of this cabinet have any business experience whatsoever, which is why after just weeks, our growth forecast is in the bin. But what makes me so angry about this is that these people, especially the likes of Thieves, were the most holier than thou when it came to the slightest indiscretion during the last administration.
No, they are. It reminds me of Mariana Spring, the BBC's fact checker, who forgot to fact check her own CV, as I recall.
She's a CV liar too. They're all at it.
This story appears to be snowballing. I think you'll find that in 2009, when she was running to first become a MP, she boasted about her ordering the paper clips in order to get elected. So, you know, this is definitely one to watch. I mean, she does seem to be quite duplicitous where it comes to this, or whether it comes to saying, I won't raise taxes and then doing it, or whether it comes to pretending to be shocked and surprised about a 20 billion black hole. So I'm not an economist, okay, but I know that 2 + 2 is 4. And I also know that our real black hole, which is the difference between the amount of money the government takes from us and the amount of money they spend, is 120 billion. So that's the structural deficit. She's off the mark by 100 billion for starters. Most of that is actually interest on our debt, which no one is interested in talking about. So that alone should make her not qualified for the job. But most economists, apart from, you know, those rare gems like Liam Halligan, actually don't care about the debt or anything, and they think that money goes on trees. So maybe she is an economist at heart, I'd have to say, just to be fair to her.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, she is going to quite quickly become one of the most hated people in Britain. Of that, I have no doubt. She's an incredibly robotic performer. She seems to have absolutely no empathy. So I mean, maybe we should actually feel sorry for Rachel Reeves with what's about to hit her, Patrick, because, for example, with the farmers, this protest in London next week is just the beginning of what is going to be a serious wave of civil unrest, but it still doesn't excuse her behaviour.
No, absolutely not. And another thing which I think is massively, you know, not to her credit, is the way that she sort of tried to wrap herself in an identity politics protection cloak by going on and on about how wonderful it is that she's the first woman chancellor. It's about the only first woman thing that Labour has ever been able to say, because the Tories have had the first women prime ministers, foreign secretaries galore, home secretaries galore. So she actually produced a film in the Treasury of how great it was that she had, quote, smashed the glass ceiling, without thinking, it's not about me, it's about, you know, what I can do for the British economy and for standards of living. So I think, you know, she will use media allies to say they're after me because I'm a woman. And that reminds me of the Farage debanking scandal, where she weighed in on the side of Alison Rose, despite Alison Rose's very bad conduct, on the grounds that Alison Rose was one of the first female bosses of a big retail bank. So at heart, she's just another identity politics extremist. And quite frankly, I'm surprised at how fast she's shown she is not up to the job.
No, very true. Very true. Now, look, do stand by, Patrick O'Flynn and Tom Sullivan, because a major update on how the Ofcommunists are trying to bankrupt Mark Steyn in just 1 minute. Don't go anywhere. But first, I love the holidays. It's my favourite time of year in many ways. Got my Christmas tree up already. But I find it can be very demanding going to all the events, dinners, looking for gifts and planning the day itself. Every year I tend to burn out quicker than the last, and it may have something to do with the fact I'm getting a little bit older. But this year, I don't plan to burn out at all. Getting older is inevitable, but feeling older isn't. As we get older, our body's ability to create energy declines, but recent scientific discoveries have found we can actually increase our energy levels in our cells by taking something called NMN. Now, NMN has been shown to increase energy and endurance, activate our body's ability to burn fat, enhance mental function and health, improve blood pressure, regulate blood sugar levels, and support many other health markers. Finding high quality, pure NMN is hard though, so that's why I use Verso. They conduct third-party testing for each batch produced to guarantee you get what you paid for. It contains the highest quality NMN and other research-backed ingredients that have been shown to increase energy levels and slow down aging. After taking Cellbean for some time, I feel like a younger version of me. I've noticed more energy, enhanced endurance, improved cognition, fat loss, better sleep, and if I do get a cold, I recover faster. So click on the link in the description on YouTube and Rumble, or head on over to www.ver.so and use the coupon code Outspoken when you check out to save 15% off your first order. I'm just going to repeat the website address, www.buy.ver.so/outspoken, and use the coupon code Outspoken. But now, back to the show. And breaking right now, Mark Steyn, one of the world's biggest truth tellers, is facing financial ruin for fighting the revolting government censors, the Ofcommunists, after he was thrown under the bus by GB News for reporting the truth about many things, including grooming gangs, but specifically COVID vaccines. So Steyn has been charged £50,000 in a court-ordered payment. He has been told he has to make this payment within 4 days after taking the UK's evil state censor to court. Now, this actually gets worse because the Ofcommunists are demanding £144,959.28 in total. That is utterly sick, given that this is an organisation trying to take away our free speech that shouldn't even exist. Now, Mark is trying to see the positive side of this situation. He's released a newsletter over the past week saying that it could be worse for him. He could be banged up and Belmarsh like poor old Tommy Robinson. However, this is a very serious and sad situation. Mark, you probably know if you've followed his career through Fox News and GB News and his independent venture, has suffered from 2 serious heart attacks. So his ability to work in the same way has been somewhat limited. So a fan website, Friends of Mark Steyn, is now attempting to raise these funds for him over the next 4 days. And this website reads, Steyn never held anti-vaccine views and even received multiple doses of the COVID-19 shots. Subsequently, Steyn miraculously survived 2 heart attacks in 2022, and although he recovered and returned to GB News, his reporting on government health data led to him being fired from GB News after pressure from Ofcom. Ofcom accused Steyn of breaching their rules as it gave a materially misleading interpretation of the figures, which risked harm to viewers, and won their battle in the UK court. Ofcom did not accuse Steyn of presenting invalid data. Again, the data he shared during a monologue was from the official UK Health Agency's website, but they said his interpretation of the data was harmful and might have led to vaccine hesitancy. Now, this organisation, the Friends of Mark Steyn, says organisations like Ofcom are the enemy of free speech and a free society, but organisations like these are precisely why so many people are turning to X, to podcasts, to alternative news outlets to get unfiltered information that they can decide and decipher for themselves. Censorship is always the enemy of the people. Now, I feel very strongly about this one personally. I have fought the Ofcommunists myself over the past year, and they may have succeeded in getting GB News to capitulate, which eventually resulted in me leaving that broadcaster, but I couldn't be happier. Because the brilliant thing about Outspoken for the moment is that I am not under the regulation of the Ofcommunists. Hallelujah. And they had to drop their last investigation into me because what they were doing was sick, and I called them out. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of that today. Suffice to say, though, I know how this organisation, the Ofcommunists, operates. They are the enemy of free speech. I also know a lot about Mark Steyn. I worked with him incredibly closely at GB News. His show preceded mine. We'd chat every day on air. And I was also part of one of the bravest pieces of broadcasting in modern British history, Victims of the Vax, where I appeared on screen with Mark Steyn. And for the first time, we gave a voice to the people who had been maimed or had relatives killed as a result of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, just remember how difficult that was to do back in 2020, 2021, 2022. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. might now be the incoming health secretary in the US, but at that time, talking about these issues anywhere on mainstream television was virtually impossible. But Mark and I knew it was important, and we knew we had to do it. So Tom Sullivan, you worked previously at GB News as well. You were there during those brave days when we were prepared to fight the establishment, where we were prepared to talk about these issues. It feels appalling to me that the Ofcommunists, who, remember, are funded by the state, are effectively trying to bankrupt Mark Steyn, still recovering from 2 heart attacks, by demanding over £144,000 from him.
It's reminiscent of the shakedown that's going on at the moment with Alex Jones and InfoWars. He might not be everyone's cup of tea. Everything's big in America, including the cost of the takedown. He's been hit with over $1 billion in a defamation, and he's being forced to sell everything and shut down the media company, which he's built up over 20 years. I just think it's such a cheek, Dan, that Ofcom use this language. Are they going to, I just want to get the wording right, are they going to say anything about the months and months of materially misleading interpretation of the dangers of COVID, of the risk of side effect from these products, which, to use their words again, risk harm to viewers? Well, in this case, many of them were not just harmed, many of them had died. And as you pointed out, Mark himself took these products and subsequently had 2 heart attacks. So to add insult to literal injury, Mark is actually a victim of these very products that he has been taken down for exposing. And I do wish that Mark is able to look on the bright side and, like yourself and some other people, actually be able to spread their message more freely and to a wider audience when released, as you say, for now, because Ofcom and the government, especially this one, they do want to give Ofcom the remit to regulate the internet. And that's game over, basically.
It is, unfortunately, because Patrick O'Flynn, there is terror throughout the mainstream media to talk about these issues. I mean, for example, I have spoken significantly about the cover-up over the Southport massacre, which is another incredibly important issue at the moment. Now, there have been a couple of brave people who've raised their head above the parapet in the mainstream media, one of them being Allison Pearson, who wrote brilliantly on this for the Daily Telegraph. But there has been absolutely no coverage of it on GB News, and they are terrified. Now, maybe you understand why they're terrified, because this is the chilling impact of Ofcom regulation. Remember, GB News itself has been fined over £100,000, isn't it? They are currently fighting that themselves in court.
I think that's right. And I can't take Ofcom seriously, or can't respect them, while they have done nothing to try and show objectivity and not groupthink. For instance, the most famous example is they thought it was fine for the Labour Home Secretary to be interviewed by her own husband on public policy, and haven't opened an investigation into that. There have also been several cases on several broadcasters where male-bodied people who identify as women and have committed serious crimes have been described all the way through the reports as she and her. And again, I see no Ofcom intervention in that whatsoever. So my suspicion about Ofcom is they're a bunch of North London liberal lefties who always weigh in on against one side and turn a blind eye against the other. Now, if you want minimal regulation, or if you want reasonably muscular regulation of broadcasting, if you don't have that underpinning of a respect for objectivity and unbiased assessment, then you won't get off the ground, and it will cause enormous angst and resentment across our society, and it will be perceived as yet another way in which one side of the political debate is silenced, and that can't be healthy for democracy.
No, it's not. And the thing is, I'm so sad about the way that GB News has been muzzled. I mean, I wanted to show this from June 2022, and I was so impacted by Alex Mitchell. He is the Scottish man, the father, who lost his leg as a result of the AstraZeneca COVID jab. And he was one of the first to receive the government payout of £120,000. But honestly, I cannot tell you how opposed so many people were to me literally interviewing him, Tom Sullivan.
I mean, Alex, I've got him on various places that I've worked. He's a great guy. And yeah, it's disgusting. And it's actually, people like Alex who are not keeping quiet. I mean, someone who's gone through that might just say, I'm just going to think about myself and look after ourselves. But, he keeps going. And as we say, thankfully, we are able to do what we're doing right now through the internet. But I don't know how long that will last.
Well, no, of course, because the Ofcommunists, and this is the terrifying thing, Patrick O'Flynn, they want to regulate the internet. And the online safety bill has been a part of that. Now, I think they're going to face a real challenge, though, Patrick, because if you look at Mark Steyn, for example, he was actually broadcasting those shows on GB News from the US. So if the Ofcommunists say, okay, we are now going to regulate the internet, what does that mean? Does that mean that they start censoring Megyn Kelly, who broadcasts to the UK via YouTube and Rumble? Does that mean that they start to censor Tucker Carlson, who broadcasts to the UK via Rumble and X? Does that mean they start to censor Steve Bannon, who broadcasts to the UK via Rumble and Rumble? And its brilliant chief executive has been very clear that if there's any form of censorship, they walk away from that territory. So you cannot access Rumble in France, for example. So this is all a very slippery slope if they do try and regulate the internet, which is why I think they've instead tried to put their foot on the throttle when it comes to GB News, because GB News is an obvious, easy target.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say GB News has clearly dialed it down on some issues, but on other issues, it's still doing excellent work. It's digging away on lots of aspects of the migration debate and has helped move the dial on that. So I don't see them kind of losing their bravery on every subject. There are certainly, they're obviously keen not to keep getting Ofcom judgments against them. And they have to be very careful that they don't lose that USP which drew viewers to them in the first place, which was to offer, a platform for opinions which had been edited out of the mainstream so-called television companies. So I hope they don't go too corporate. I hope they don't smooth off too many of those edges, because they have played a role, and you two have both played a role during your time with them in something really exceptional, which is blowing the lid off the cartel. And now we have all sorts of new ways of broadcasting, and your platform, Dan, is become one of the biggest independent platforms, and this job of trying to suppress and uphold uniformity of thought is becoming far harder for the regulators. And now we have this amazing election result in the United States, by far the biggest media market in the world. I think the likes of Ofcom could find themselves quite easily overwhelmed, and the whole idea of authorizing opinions and cancelling other opinions is just going to start looking ridiculous.
Totally. I mean, the Ofcommunists should be abolished. In a free society, there should be no state regulator. I have always believed that. I've always taken a different approach, Tom, to the GB News approach. And I think Nigel Farage was always with me, to be honest, because I never thought that we should be saying, oh, no, it's great. We welcome this regulation from the Ofcommunists. No, absolutely not. Call it out. Call out their regulation, which actually over COVID, for example, proved to be so wrong, because it was the Ofcommunists who were making it impossible for people like me to say wearing a mask is useless. It's hopeless. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to help anything. So I do think there has been a game change. And they are going to look increasingly ridiculous, because if you look at what happened in the US election, it was the independent media that was driving the conversation. I believe the mainstream media died the night that Donald Trump was reelected to the White House. So I think they are going to look increasingly out of touch if the Ofcommunists try and usher in a censorship regime here in the UK. But it does appear that is what they are doing.
I mean, I think I'm not against a media regulator in principle, but I do think it should have very basic rules when it comes to not showing, for example, explicit material before a watershed and things like that. And I'm on my fourth TV channel fourth Ofcom regulated TV channel at the moment. So I've done, more kind of training than most. And the rules are actually quite, to be honest, the rules themselves are quite open to interpretation. They're quite reasonable and they're quite balanced. Some of them are a bit, weird. For example, if you want to discuss one of these stupid woke stories like the, ban dog walking to not be racist and stuff, the way it often plays out is that, oh, you have to get someone who will support that opinion, who actually doesn't deserve, airtime at all. And you kind of end up giving equal weight to lunatics. So, it has its issues. The problem is, Dan, is with how it's interpreted, because the people who run Ofcom decide what breaks the rules and what doesn't. And they decide this in a completely ideological way. And I do think the US election, broke the internet. The internet broke the mainstream media. I mean, the American networks, at least the Democrat supported ones, they are, even now still, they are kind of North Korean in their delusions, and they don't even pretend to do it. So I am a fan of, the British way of broadcasting, which is kind of the flip. So our newspapers are a bit crazy and our broadcasting tries or pretends to be at least a bit more sensible. There, that's the other way around. But the problem is, it's like with the BBC. People say, let's abolish the BBC. I actually think, no, let's take over the BBC and fill it with, common sense patriots, and actually have it promote the values and the great history and culture of this country. And I think, like what Trump is doing now, and they're saying, we're not going to afuera like Javier Milei. We're actually going to put our own people into these institutions. I think that's a route that Reform, Nigel Farage, and other people who have the right idea might do well to kind of look into and take up the mantle.
Well, I think we need a First Amendment. I genuinely do. Look at what's happened to Allison Pearson this week. I think if Nigel Farage was to make a key part of his reform agenda, Patrick O'Flynn, a First Amendment, we absolutely guarantee free speech. I mean, obviously it would have a different name because we don't have the same type of constitution, but the First Amendment in the US protects free speech. That would solve all of these issues, Patrick. It would mean Mark Steyn would be allowed to broadcast whatever he wanted. It would mean Tommy Robinson wasn't in prison. It would mean that Allison Pearson wasn't having 2 police officers turn up at her Essex home for a post on X.
Yeah, I mean, I do think around active trials, does need to be rules, about not prejudicing a trial as it goes through, with the risk of crashing the trial and allowing guilty people to get away with it. So I'm slightly old-fashioned on that one. I do, on the other hand, think in general terms, a bias in favour of freedom of expression, and if someone can be shown to have got it wrong, that shouldn't be the end of the world. Perhaps they should put their hands up about it if it's definitely something they got wrong. But kind of, so what? And we read, for instance, of the Mohammed Al Fayed using his power, and the British libel laws to mask decades of sexual abuse and assaults on female employees. So the danger we face in a free society, I would argue, is far more, not allowing daylight in to dark doings than it is on too much daylight, and the truth occasionally not coming out straight and getting mangled. You have to be in favor of openness. And ultimately, if someone gets it badly wrong, then as long as you have complete freedom of speech for everyone, that they will be exposed for doing that. Yeah, the British knee jerk seems to be, oh no, we've got to ban those opinions because we don't want the lower orders, getting angry.
Yeah, I mean, they were
About
terrified
stuff.
when it came to Mark Steyn, weren't they? Because he was dropping truth bombs night after night, and the Ofcommunists did succeed. They saw Mark Steyn leave GB News, they saw Lawrence Fox leave GB News, they saw Father Calvin Robinson leave GB News, they saw me leave GB News. But if they think that they have silenced us, they are completely delusional about where the media is heading, because we don't need to be on a TV channel anymore. And actually, we're able to do better work. And I just want to say about Mark Steyn, if you can support him, please do. I will post the link in the description box below, and I will also post it on my X page. Mark is such a proud man. He would never, ever ask for anyone to support a cause like this. And he hasn't, actually. This has been set up by the Friends of Mark Steyn organisation. But just think about that. He's recovering from 2 heart attacks. He was standing up for free speech. And the Ofcommunists say, we want £144,000 off you, even though we don't need the money. We don't need the money because it all comes from the British taxpayer anyway. And I'm actually very excited too, because Mark Steyn is still going strong. And for the first time next year, I'm going to be joining the Mark Steyn cruise. Can you believe it? And it's going to be like the soundest cruise ever. I think people like Allison Pearson and Lilani Dowdy and Lawrence and Calvin and Naomi Wolf were all on board this ship. So it's going to be a very, very wild week, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. Maybe Patrick O'Flynn and Tom Sullivan, you need to get on board.
It's on my bucket list.
Thank you both so much. Fabulous Friday superstar panel. Thank you for your company too, although it's not over. It's not over, because in the Uncancelled After Show, Angela Levin is up. We're going to be discussing Tina Brown issuing the shock plea for Prince William to take Prince Harry back for the good of Britain and the royal family. What is that about? I completely disagree. Angela Levin will have all the analysis on that. And of course, the after show now broadcast exclusively every day, Monday to Friday, on demand via Substack. Substack is a beautiful free speech platform, not regulated, has none of the issues of the Ofcommunists that we've just been discussing, and I would love your support there. You can sign up at www.outspoken.live. If you become a paid member from just £5 a month, you get that half hour of extra content every single day. You get my exclusive journalism, you get my exclusive columns. It's all happening on Substack now. Substack is such a brilliant platform too. You can message me direct. There's lots of ways that we communicate and live chats around major news events too. So at this stage, what we do is we come off YouTube and Rumble, we move to our own platform, Substack, to continue the conversation in the Uncancelled After Show. Let me repeat the address, www.outspoken.live. It has been a big week. I have appreciated your company and your support every step of the way. Please keep spreading the word about Outspoken and hit subscribe if you're watching now on YouTube and Rumble. I'm back with you 5 p.m. UK time on Monday. That is midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time. I hope you have a fabulous, restful weekend, and most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you. But I hope to see you on Substack in just one moment with the incomparable Angela Levin.